All right, here we go on a Thursday night, back and live in studio again. Hope everyone's had a great week. Man, it's been a crazy week, full of surprises, full of exciting things, and a lot of great basketball, football action, as is customary, as the snow continues to fall here in the middle of January, heading towards February. Mother Nature doesn't let up on us, but they really don't ever let up in the Erie area to begin with. So, we're used to it, I guess, at this point. Welcome in, everybody, to the Gem City Sports Podcast, brought to you by Rebich Investments. They do everything financial guidance, and they do it well, but best thing about it is they keep financial guidance simple. If you want more information, simply head to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can do it the easy thing and call their phone number, 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. Got a lot to talk about in tonight's episode. Jonathan Williams is going to join us in a little bit. He's a busy man tonight, getting ready to head back down south in a few weeks. But we start tonight's episode with some high school basketball talk because there's been a lot that's going on. Last time we had an episode on Friday, we talked all about the rivalry games that were going to transpire that night, right? Cathedral, Prep, Meadville, McDowell, Erie, Fairview, Girard. We saw how those shook out. But the big question tonight is, what's the one or two teams that we've been most impressed with between those rivalry games and most importantly throughout the whole season? Nobody better to join us on this Thursday evening than Tom Koval, former District 10 championship winning head coach and still big in the basketball scene. He's been our insider for us all winter long. It's been chilly, Tom. You staying warm?
I am now. I mean, geez, it's almost up to the 20s, so it's a lot warmer now.
I was going to say, it felt balmy walking out. I just announced the GM Harbor Creek game, and I was walking out thinking to myself, maybe I could take my coat off. Kind of feels that way. It's been chilly. It's been frigid all week long. And in all seriousness, hope everyone who's watching us is getting a chance to stay warm and braving those cold temperatures, because certainly they've been really, really difficult to deal with. But Tom, I want to start with a team that's been really hot, and we talked about them last week in the big rivalry game. Were you at McDowell Erie? I apologize, I didn't get a chance to ask you.
No, I did watch it. I watched parts of it live stream. So
okay, so you've got a good idea. I want to start with, we talk about so many teams that I think really have hit the nail on the head in terms of what they need to do in region play to start the year. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start talking about McDowell, because we knew Kevin O'Connor's team was good, right? They had a lot of returning stars. They were aggressive in the box. You've talked about their ability to beat teams on the inside. But I think their last 4 or 5 games in particular, really since they beat Cathedral Prep, they beat Cathedral Prep in that triple overtime game. Then they beat a Pittsburgh team in Alderdice. Girard demolish a Yellow Jacket team that's looking good in 4A. And then Friday, they beat Erie 72-39. Now, I know that, of course, as we've talked about, this Royal team has struggled to be able to maintain the consistency because they've had a lot of roster turnover and new players. But when you watch that game on Friday, Tom, what to you impressed you the most about this McDowell team that's sitting right now at 15-2? They haven't lost since 2024.
Well, it's really tough for me to talk highly on McDowell, but
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
It's really hard. It's really hard not to. I actually spoke with Coach O'Connor today a little bit and just asked him what he felt about this team compared to previous ones that he's had. And his quote was probably the best undersized team that he's ever coached. They don't have a lot of size, but boy, do they play hard. And I think, to answer your question, the thing that has impressed me the most is their defense, right? The team defense that they play and how hard they work on the defensive end of the court has been pretty impressive. To hold some of these teams, into the 30s, while they're scoring, in the 60s and 70s is pretty impressive. In this day and age where defense is sometimes a lost art, those boys are out there and they're playing hard.
One of the things that I noticed, I had a chance to watch back some of the McDowell Erie game as well, and the McDowell Prep game, of course, the 2 big rivalry ones that we talk about. But the one thing that's been most impressive to me, in District 10, typically, specifically in rivalry games, region games, it's hard to get out to big leads. And then when you get out to big leads, it's hard to maintain them. Heck, I was just at General McLean. Harbor Creek was up by 21-22 in the second half. Ended up being a 3-point game. GM clawed their way back. And it's always been difficult, at least from my perspective, if you have 2 somewhat evenly matched teams in terms of school size. If you get up big, It's hard to keep it, and it's hard to keep a big lead to begin with. But McDowell is running out to huge leads early in games. We saw it in the game against Erie. We didn't see it as much in the prep game, although I think they started that one out well, too, and ended up holding on for the win. Of course, we talked about in triple overtime. And then, to me, the most impressive one was the game they won just 2 days ago against Meadville. In a squad that shut down Lucas Luteran, who had been shooting the lights out of the gym, and really just seemed like their game plan was completely on point. And so just, is that something you're seeing? Because at any time I watch McDowell film, I get out of the end of the first quarter, and the game already looks like it's over.
Yeah, boy, they really play consistently throughout the game. One of the things I always used to preach is up 20, down 20, we're going to play the same way. And they surely do that, right? They're playing hard team basketball on the offensive end and the defensive end of the court all game long. Whether it's their starting five or a couple guys off the bench, I don't know how deep they are, but a few of those guys come off the bench, play the same way, and they don't miss a beat from their starting five. And I think that's something to be said about a veteran coaching staff, and it's definitely something that is part of the senior leadership that they have on that team. It's really nice at the high school level to have a good group of seniors, and I think McDowell has that.
I know we talk about when this McDowell team is brought up, the big guys, of course, Camden's the leading scorer. He's been one of their clutchest players all year on offense. Quentin Orlando can run the point really, really well. You mentioned Baby Porter last week, and I want to ask you, because you've gotten a chance to see them now a few times. Is there a couple of guys outside of the top one or two that we see every game that has been a key to the success? Because I think now in basketball in this day and age, and you know this better than anybody, depth is so important, right? And we've seen the teams that are rising to the top, they don't just have one or two shooters. I think really the only team that, to me, I've seen in District 10 that is the anomaly would be Meadville with Burchard and Luteran, and they still have some good pieces as well. Are there guys that are starting to emerge for this Trojan team that maybe weren't recognizable on paper at the beginning of the season, but now are starting to emerge in a big way?
I think you got to look at the glue guy. He wasn't there last year because of that late football injury, but Blaze Myers is like I said, a glue guy. He keeps everything together. He makes the extra pass. He's got a sense of toughness inside. He can score a little bit too. I think to have somebody on the floor, like a floor general like that with some leadership skills, is so important. And you got a group of seniors around him that just feed off of that. They're all, like I said, very consistent with how they play the game.
So McDowell sitting now at 15-2. We just talked about it. They haven't lost since December 21st. And you look at the rest of their schedule. By the way, there aren't that many games. We go into the middle of February, then it's playoff time. Northeast Cathedral Prep, huge game coming up next Friday night against their rival, the Ramblers. And then it's Erie on Tuesday, State College on Saturday, and back at Meadville Thursday. So a lot of region games to end the season. It's not going to be a cakewalk for the Trojans, but 15-2, and they continue to roll and they continue to win. And that is the team that we have seen, really, amongst all teams, that has just been consistent beyond belief in this day and age, and then 2025 to start the back half of the basketball season. Jonathan Williams joining us here. Jonathan, it's good to see you. I hope that you made it through the cold and the snow and are back. I hear you're also doing a media tour tonight.
Apparently, man. Just jumped over on Primetime Sports Guys over on 90.5 for Gannon. So that was fun. It's always fun going back kind of to where you started at. That was my first kind of radio gig and hosting that show with Trevor Cabella. So always fun to go back and kind of, go back to your roots a little bit. So yeah, it was fun.
You're good. You're just in time because we're about to switch gears here. We were just talking about McDowell basketball on the boys' side. We've got a chance to talk about the girls a little bit, but the matchup that we were alluding to last week that I don't think, Tom, we really got a chance to talk much about, but a game that just went final, parent in the stands texting me just a few minutes ago, Fairview just beat Harbor Creek 39-31 in girls basketball. So a huge win for the Tigers on the road in region play. The only two undefeated teams in Region 6. Now Fairview sits at 11-3. They're 3-0 in the region. Tom, I know that you follow Fairview pretty intently with what you do now in this day and age following your head coaching career. Take me through your initial reaction to this game, because I think we expected it was going to be close, expected it was going to be low scoring, and now Fairview pulls it out and have control of the region after one matchup with the Huskies.
Yeah, not surprising at all with that score. I spoke with Coach Garrity the other day, And he said one of his keys to hopefully winning this game was to be able to defend. And looking at that score, they certainly did. They can pressure the ball with their guards, and they have some size inside as well. So holding them to 31, I think you said that's a great defensive ball game there.
Let me go ahead, Jonathan.
Sorry, I'm just looking at, like, Fairview has the best points per game average in the entire area. I'm looking at every region right now. They're only averaging giving up 25.4 points a game. So, like, that's been their bread and butter all season, is quite literally suffocating teams. So when you're able to play good defense, if another team can't score, they can't win. So yeah, holding a Harbor Creek team that's averaging 53 points a game to 31 is a great defensive performance, a great defensive effort, and that's how you beat a team that is as good as Harbor Creek. This is going to be a really interesting region run, because these two teams are really good.
Let me just put this point out there for a second, because I got a chance to cover both these teams in the last few years working in TV. They both return a lot. Fairview in particular return almost all their players from last year. They only had one senior on their team last season. Same with Harbor Creek. They have a significant amount of players returning, Rick Brzezilski in particular, who's averaging nearly 20 a game. But the thing that impressed me most in not watching this game, but knowing this Fairview team, that I think is resonant in the score tonight, is that there is a rotational game that Aaron Garrity plays in which he can get freshmen and sophomore to buy into this defensive metric so early in the season that by the time you get to January, they're firing on all cylinders. I think, and Tom, maybe you've talked to him more so, I'm sure, than I have, and I've talked to him a few times. There were points early in the season where it didn't seem like that defense had completely glued itself together yet, right? I mean, they held Northwestern to 33 points, but still didn't look completely comfortable. Then they follow that up, the offense struggles in a loss to Erie High. But it just seems like as we're getting into the end of January, despite the youth of this roster, as has really been the case, you could argue, since the Hope Garrity year when they won the District 10 championship back a few years back, and even the year that she was a senior, I believe, that they ended up losing in the District 10 semifinals. This Fairview defense is now in late January form, which to me is scary for the rest of the region and, quite frankly, the rest of the classification come playoff time, Tom. And I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Aaron Garrity was a few years behind me at Gannon, and I remember him following me and Steve Moyer around campus when he was walking on from McDowell, and later on in his career, all defense GLIAC player. I mean, the kid worked so hard, and he has definitely, made that a staple of his program. And those girls, they defend really hard. I think they had a tough loss to graduation with Ella Garrity, right? Was his brother Rand. She was a glue girl, and she was long and could rebound. I think they're finally starting to feel out their team now. It's a little bit different defensively, but they got some guards that can pressure the ball, and they got one girl that can protect the rim. So yeah, they are a defensive juggernaut right now, and I would hate to try to score against them.
Yeah, I don't think people really understand. You mentioned the Garrities, and that's the name that, of course, rings true from coaching to playing when you talk about Fairview. But I don't think people give Bree Height enough credit. She doesn't always factor in on the score sheet, but she's one of those players, and I laughed about it too, because I was talking tonight with Tim McQueenie, who runs the stats, longtime baseball coach for Harbor Creek, and I said, man, it feels like Tucker Schwatek has been playing District 10 basketball for 8 years. Same with Bree Height. I feel like she has been playing District 10 basketball since like 2018. That's how prevalent she has been with this Fairview team, but you don't get that much. That kind of a player in girls basketball who can attack the rim, who can score as well. She's got a decent touch from mid-range. And to me, with all due respect to Paige, and she is a dynamic scorer, and there are other players as well that are big time, I look at this Fairview team, and to me, so goes Bree Height, so go the Tigers. That she is the one, to me, the piece that keeps this team together.
No doubt. You love watching her play because she's got that old school back to the basket game as well.
Right.
She does such a great job sealing off her defenders. In the offense that Aaron runs there, they'll reverse the ball real quick and seal her on the backside to get scores, and the girls pass it to her really well. So I agree with you on that. She's big on the defensive end, getting rebounds and changing shots close to the rim. So yeah, she's something to worry about when you play that team, no doubt.
Jonathan, you'll love this reference because, and I'm not saying that she's there yet, because there's plenty of course, work, and she's nowhere near the age that this player is. But the one player she reminds me the most of, we're talking about Gannon. How about Sam Perosco? She's got that kind of a feel where she can just take over games. And I think in high school, it's so important to have that sort of position. And Fairview has it in Bree Height. And I again, she's also a player that never tires out. I don't think I ever saw her leave the floor, save for being in foul trouble when I covered the team in this year. Just a reliable player and someone that I think Aaron Garrity is going to have to look to as a senior leader when they get into the postseason.
Yeah, and when you have those type of kind of like glue players, and it's almost like having a little security blanket or a safety blanket on the court. You know when you have a time where you need to get a bucket, okay, draw something up for her. You know, if you need an offensive board or you need a good defensive stop and to finish it off with a rebound, you can count on her to come down with it. It's just having that player that you know can do all of the little things and someone that you know you can go to when you're in crunch time and you don't have to worry about her. You don't have to worry about anything that she's going to do with the ball. You have the ultimate trust in her as a player and the decisions that she's going to make with the ball. So having someone like that on your team is really important and really beneficial.
Tom, when we look at the other side of this coin in Harbor Creek, I don't personally think they're going to dwell on this loss very long. Mark Corey does a really good job of getting his team ready to play. Is there anything for you that would be somewhat concerning or things that you can look at positively for the Huskies moving forward? They're not going to drop very far, and they're now sitting with one loss, they and General McLean, and we're going to get to the Lancers in a second. I'm going to ask you guys about that in a minute. But what about the Huskies do you think can they take from a game like this based on the team that they have this year? Because, again, they've got plenty of players that can score. I think they just ran into a machine in Fairview's defense tonight.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, there's some easy games in the county and the region, and it's tough when you run into a really good team like Fairview. But I think Mark will have them back and ready to go. You just got to get used to playing that style, ready to tough it out on defense, and every possession counts. And I think as they roll and get momentum coming back into the next time that they play, right, we'll see their best game on both sides for sure.
Let me throw this out there to you, Tom, because, you know, maybe I can chime in on this too. I've seen this team play a lot. We look at regions, the region, Region 6 for Harbor Creek, Fairview, and I look at that and I think to myself, okay, we've been calling it a 2-horse race, but how much does General McLean factor into this? They're sitting at 10-5. They've got one of the most prolific scorers in Libby Opp, who just went over 1,000 points a week ago in a Lancer win. They get Fort LaBeouf tomorrow. If they win that game, you're sitting at 2-1 in the region. And now GM goes on to play Fairview and Harbor Creek each in the next week and a half, couple of weeks. You know, they didn't fare very well against the Huskies back in mid-January. Harbor Creek kind of shut them down defensively. Do you think General McLean at all factors potentially into this region equation, or is it a 2-horse race in your mind, Tom?
I'm not counting Sarah Schultz out for a second, right? Like you said, they got good guard play. They got a girl that can score. And not for a minute in high school basketball can you sit back and think that you have anything won, because everybody wants to win, and you're going to get their best game at the end of the season. So when you have a girl like her that can score from anywhere, she's dangerous. And if she's hot and the rest of the team's playing well, anybody can win. And like I said, you got some veteran coaches in that region too. And it's so easy to overlook an early game in the playoffs and you're out.
I think the other thing, too, for GM, the one thing that you have to have, and Tom, you know this, to be able to run against a good defense is someone who can run the point. And I think Sam DeRay's done a really good job, not necessarily in the scoring department. She averages almost 10 a game, but she, from the games that I have watched firsthand, she's got really good ball smarts. And so I think if there is a player that can try to chip away at Fairview's defense, call out smart plays, make smart decisions, she's one of them. But now you have this really interesting dynamic because GM's got to play Fairview twice. They still have to play Harbor Creek again. Harbor Creek, Fairview still have to play each other one more time. And again, when it comes playoff time, as we've talked about, seeding matters because now you have lots of teams that are clumped into certain classifications. It just makes for all more interesting basketball come the stretch part of the season when you really, more so, I think, than the last couple of years, need to be able to have a top seed because you're going to have to win a couple of games if you want to guarantee yourself a spot in the state playoffs. Guys, let's flip back for just a second to the boys' side, and then we'll get to a couple of teams that I think maybe are flying under the radar. But I want to preview a game just for a second that is huge in boys in Region 5 in Fort LaBeouf and Warren coming up tomorrow night at 7:30. You know, Tom, we had Fort LaBeouf on a couple of weeks ago on the show. This team is scoring the basketball a lot. Warren, though, I think is one of those teams that always is just fundamentally sound and they hang around. When you look at this game specifically, I think it's such an intriguing matchup for both of these squads because they do things so differently, right? In terms of Warren's defensive capabilities and Fort LaBeouf's ability to score. What are the interesting keys in this game for you, for two teams that are fighting for probably the top spot in the region, depending on what Oil City does?
I think shooting percentage is going to be really big, right? When Fort LaBeouf is knocking down shots, they're winning ball games, right? And to see Warren's defense against that, especially the outside shot, right? You can win by the 3 and you can die by the 3, right? When things are going in, it's really easy to coach and it's a lot of fun. When you're struggling from the floor, it makes things a lot more difficult, and you have to really grind to try to get scores. So it'll be an interesting matchup to see that defense go against their offensive skills for sure.
So let me ask you a question there, Coach. When you're playing against a team that can shoot the ball as effectively as Fort LaBeouf can and can shoot the ball that well from outside, what are some things that you can try to do to them defensively to maybe throw them off their rhythm and maybe influence them into a worse shooting performance than normal?
Well, scouting report's really big, right? If you got some guys that are set shooters that can knock down threes, then you want to knock them off their block and make sure they put the ball on the floor, right? We want to make them dribble. So that's your key, to make them dribble all the time. The second thing is kind of changing up your defense, right? If you can switch to zone and man, right, to speed them up and kind of change tempo for them, because it's hard to shoot when sometimes you're moving slow on offense and sometimes you're moving quick. So you get that change on them all the time. You can ruin their rhythm. If you play the same defense, it may be effective at the beginning, but as they get used to it, they get a rhythm and they're ready to go. So changing up your defense can really help with that, and making sure you know who their shooters are, right? So you don't help too far off them and you make them put that ball on the floor.
That game at Fort LaBeouf, by the way, tomorrow, 7:30 on Friday, and there's still a lot of games left to go in the regular season. But let me throw this out there to you guys, and I want to. It's a little. I hesitate to bring the subject up now because we still have a few weeks until playoff time. And Tom, for you knew who you were playing in the postseason, so this didn't matter that much. It was McDowell, Erie, in 6A. But I look at 4A and the way that it's split up. And, of course, we've talked about the 17 teams and how, in my opinion, I think you just have a 17-team tournament. You make 16, 17 play a play-in game, and then you have a traditional bracket. But I'm now curious to see, as we move through the season, seeing how good both Region 5 and Region 6 are, and that the majority of the teams in those regions are Class 4A, how District 10 decides to compare the talent and success of Region 5 and the talent and success of Region 6. Because you look right now and you say, okay, well, Girard, Fairview are clearly the class of Region 6. Girard just beat Fairview with a big fourth quarterback last Friday. They're playing well with Kenny Godoy, and Mark Schreier's got his team good to go. We know Pat Flaherty is going to have his squad likely playing even better the next time they face Girard, and they're 7-0 at home, 5-1 in the region. But then I look at Region 5 and I say, okay, you've got three teams at 6-1. Oil City, Warren, Fort LaBeouf. They've all got really good records. They all can score the basketball. Warren's defense is tremendous. Do we have a guess right now? And maybe, Tom, you can answer this, but because I don't even know if I have an answer yet. Normally I do. It's a little odd when I don't have words in my mouth for this. Does the District 10 committee, how do they factor in Region 5 and Region 6? Because I just think it's going to be fascinating with most of these teams in 4A and the teams that we mentioned at the top, all in 4A, how they decipher who's going to be the top seeds moving forward, given the fact that in the case with a lot of these schedules, not everybody's played everybody per se. Some have, but not everybody has.
Yeah, boy, that's a tough job, and I don't think District 10 ever gets it completely right, and I don't know that it's their fault. I tease Mike Collette a lot. Boy, you're not playing against me anymore at Erie High, right? You got a much easier schedule, and he laughs about it, but I think you fall in whatever region you fall in, and you get a lot of those games. So it's hard to be subjective about it. Like I would say that Fairview and Girard's in a tougher region. I think they're more battle tested. So I would, if I was on the District 10 committee, I would, even if they had a worse record, I would be giving them a higher seed. And then somebody would look at that and say, well, that's not fair. So I don't think you can make anybody happy. I just think as a coach and as a player, you just better be ready to play in that first playoff game, because you don't know what team you're going to get, and they're coming out and the record's 0-0 in that first game no matter what.
And I think the other thing too, Jonathan, and you know this as a former athlete, and we talk about this all the time with the college football playoffs, even to an extent with the NFL playoffs, is that you look at these 5 teams in particular, and there is a lot of head-to-head between each other, and that normally would matter if we're talking football. But, non-region games happen a lot in the beginning of the season, and a lot of these non-region games, for example, Gerard Warren was back on December 13th. You look at a game, Oil City, and just going down their schedule here, they've had to play some teams from Region 6, but it wasn't necessarily in the middle part of the season. It was the first 5-6 games of the year. And so I guess what I wonder and what I question is, how much will the head-to-head come into play? It will have to. I just wonder how much, maybe more compared to what we talk about head-to-head in football, if you get a situation where you have similar overall records, similar region records for these 5 teams in particular who are all jostling for probably the top 2 seeds in 4A.
It's difficult to factor it in that heavily. Like, you feel like you have to weigh it in, especially if teams have played against each other. But when you're talking about some of these matchups that have occurred in the first 5 games of the season, like we've talked about on here before, you've got teams that don't have all of their offensive sets in. You've got teams that haven't had a ton of chances to practice. We had snowstorms affecting the beginning of the season, so there were a lot of teams that are just going to be very different towards the end of the season than they were when those matchups occurred. So while you have to take those matchups and those results into account, I don't feel like you can factor it in very heavily, given that a lot of those out of region matchups occurred early in the season, where a lot of these teams are completely different and have completely different makeups as far as how they play the game and how they approach the game towards the end of the year.
And keep in mind, too, any of the matchups, a lot of them specifically that we see between Region 5 and 6, a decent amount of them are close. I mean, just specifically, you pick one off the top of your head, Gerard Warner was 57-50 on December 13th. Right. It's not like these are complete blowouts, and I think it goes to show there's a lot of talent in 4A, but it just adds to the story, right? It started with, oh my goodness, 17 teams, what does the committee do? And now it's, oh my goodness, how do you see these teams? Because we know there's going to be, it's not going to be one team that makes into the postseason, I believe, and I'm not completely sure on this. I think it's 5 that are going from 4A this year. So you really have to give a lot of credence to the top seeds, because now, you win 2 games in the postseason if it's a 16-team tournament, and you're going to be in to the state playoffs. But as you know, and Tom, I think you can preach to this, being in the state playoffs is one thing. Being the 1 seed as opposed to the 3 or 4 seed in the state playoffs is another thing, because then your Pittsburgh opponent becomes that much more difficult.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, and even in the WIPUL, it's just it's the luck of the draw sometimes, because in the WIPUL tournaments, a good team can lose in the first round and still make it to the playoffs at a lower seed, and you get matched up with them. It's so unpredictable at the high school level. With high school kids, you're counting on 16 and 17-year-old kids with all kinds of things going on in their life, and you just expect them to come out and be as consistent as ever. It's really tough to predict. But one thing I can say over all my years of coaching is, if you're playing well at the end of the season and that carries into the playoffs, it's such an important thing.
So big game coming up tomorrow. Warren taking on Warren taking on Fort LaBeouf. That will be the second matchup of the year between these 2 teams. Fort LaBeouf took the first one 52-50 back on December 17th. So again, keep in mind how close these 2 teams are, and that will be a battle for a team to at least stay tied at the top of the region with Oil City. Oil City also is in action coming up tomorrow. They're going to take on Seneca at home in a region bout. All right, before we go here, Tom, give me a team or 2, maybe in boys or girls, that we haven't talked about that's on your radar. I know you talked last week about Meadville, and justifiably so, with Bertrand and Lutheran. Is there a team that you've seen in the last week or so that's really impressed you that we should be keeping our eye on, that we don't necessarily talk about week to week?
Well, we don't have a 17-team tournament for 6A. It's one and done.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I'll tell you what, there's nothing more nerve-wracking than that as a coach, or probably a player, to know that all the marbles go in that one game. Yeah. But watch out for Erie High. I think everybody knows a really big win against Cathedral Prep after a devastating loss against McDowell. They really turned it around, played really well defensively. I know Marachi did not play, but that's a really good win for the Erie High Royals, and they're going to be ready for McDowell. McDowell's playing really well, but Erie keeps getting better as the season goes.
And I'm sure you'd probably be happy too. And we talk about on the show all the time that you'd prefer tough schedules down the stretch so you can see where you're at. And they have no cupcakes the rest of the way. Their last 6 games, Girard, Meadville, McDowell, Pittsburgh Central Catholic, and down I-79 South, and Iroquois and Cathedral Prep. And I think we all believe Iroquois is better than what their record's showing this year. So again, no cupcakes. You talk about Erie being ready for McDowell, and you know this, Tom. It's 32 minutes. So you really throw the records out the window, specifically in 6A. As we saw in football.
There's no doubt that and I won't pinpoint a year, but I had a better team in McDowell beat us. And I know darn well Kevin would say the same thing. He came in with a favorite team and we just played our tails off and we beat them. And it's unfortunate that a team has to go sometimes, but it's one game. And like they say, any given Sunday, right? If they're ready to play and the thing bounces your way a little bit, anybody can come out on top.
Yeah, what a season it's going to be down the stretch, and those are some of our teams to watch and some of the big matchups that we're taking a look at. Stay tuned, by the way. We're looking to do some live shows down the road in the next couple of weeks at some places for some big games, so stay tuned. Should be fun in the next few weeks as well. Tom Koval, it's always been fun. Great insight from you as always. And again, stay warm. I know, man, we just need a few days where we can turn the heaters back on so they're effective.
I feel you. Right, it's snowing in Florida, so
yeah. Is it really?
It is. Yes.
You're kidding me. Okay, so that actually makes sense. So get this: my mom was actually supposed to fly into Florida and then drive up. She's got a marathon in Alabama. She texted me about a half hour ago. She said, "Hey, my flight to Florida was canceled. I got laid over in Charlotte." I'm thinking, What?
Yeah, it's snowing all across the Southeast right now. Even my area of South Carolina, they're out of school. They've got a couple inches on the ground. They're going crazy down there.
So what you're saying is your football season is being delayed by 3 weeks then?
Yeah, pretty much, because there's nothing. Nobody's open anywhere. All businesses are closed. They don't know what to do with themselves.
Oh my gosh, you gotta love it. I'll tell you what. This time of year, man, it's always fun. Hey Tom, great stuff as always, man. Hope to have you back again next week.
Can't wait. Thanks for having me.
All right, Tom Koval, former District 10 championship winning coach. Always great insight from him. And every time we talk, there are big games. Big game tonight, of course. If you missed it earlier in the podcast, Fairview over Harbor Creek 39-31. Got a chance to talk about that game. Warren Fort LaBeouf, a big one tomorrow. There are some other ones that we didn't mention as well. And McDowell just continues to roll, Jonathan. And now it's such an interesting trend that basketball season is taking the same form as football, because we talked at the end of the year. And again, I know you haven't been in the Erie area covering sports as long as some, and I haven't either. I've lived here all my life, but I've only been covering sports for 5, 6, 7 years. But it was arguably record-wise and competitive-wise the most competitive season in terms of depth that we saw from the 3A class, from the 4A class in quite some time, and even in the 2A class to an extent. We're going to see that again this year in basketball, specifically in 4A on the boys and girls side. It's shaping up to me to be an argument where there are 4 or 5 teams on the boys side that could be the number 1 seed, and probably 2 or 3 teams on the girls side.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of teams. I mean, there are a lot of teams that are tied for region leads and 6-1, 6-0 teams. Like, there are so many different teams where you don't know which way it's quite going to go yet. You have these big matchups, and they're kind of pick 'em games a little bit. It's a matter of one team getting hot at the right time. You got a team like Fort LaBeouf. If they come out and they're lights out shooting the ball, okay, they look like the better team today. But then you got a team like Warren, where if they come out and they're playing defense the way we know that they can play defense, they look like the better team today. So it's a lot of parity across high school basketball in this area this year, it seems like, and a lot of good teams. And a lot of teams that are close, and a lot of teams that are like right there on the cusp of maybe knocking off one or two of those teams that we're looking at, saying, okay, they're going to be battling for high seeds in the playoffs. So a lot of parity, and that's great. That's great for this area.
Yeah, amen to that. And a few weeks left to go in the regular season. We start playoffs in just a couple of weeks, so we will be eyeing that. Jonathan will be eyeing it from afar when hopefully the snow clears in South Carolina. Because in all seriousness, if there was, let's say, 2 to 3 inches of snow on the ground, would your team be practicing in February?
Probably not.
Are you serious?
So serious, because nobody knows how to drive in anything down there, and there's no infrastructure to handle snow. So there's no salt, there's no plows, or there might be, but it's nothing like we have up here. So if they get more than an inch or two, the roads are pretty much undrivable.
I'll tell you what, it's so fascinating to me because we had the first snowfall of the year, and I think to myself, when I get on the road, I see all these cars going 20 and 25 miles an hour. I'm going to sound like I'm a reckless driver. I'm not. Some people might say that I am. There have been nights where I've driven plenty over the speed limit if I had to get back to the station or whatnot. And you were in the car with me the one night, but we're not going to go there on the air. But first snowfall for Erie, and there are cars that, to me, I don't think know how to drive. Right. I would just be so intrigued to go even a few hundred miles south to see like a Virginia. My brother at Old Dominion University in Norfolk got 3 inches of snow, and he said everything got shut down. It's just fascinating to me. I don't know. I just find it amazing that, but hey, then again, I guess if, it's never going to happen, but if Erie were to get a hurricane, or something like that, we probably wouldn't know what to do either. So,
I moved up here and it was 80 degrees when I moved up here. And when I got up here, everybody was talking about how hot it was, not realizing that I just left an 100+ degree heat wave for 2 weeks straight back home. So we're built for different things in different places for sure.
Well, see, what that gave you is that gave you false hope is what it did. You had the feeling that Erie was a lot different than what it was. And you found out no longer. Anyway, well, hopefully the cold and the snow can go away. Hey, our show is always, by the way, brought to you by Rebish Investments, keeping financial guidance simple. If you want more info, simply head to their website, www.rebishinvestments.com, or you can call 814. Goodness, I need to go here to get the number, 814-734-3433. Normally, I know that off the top of my head. My apologies. 814-734-3433, the number to dial for Rebish Investments. They are wonderful, keeping financial guidance simple. All right, a few minutes left in our podcast, and we're going to talk coming up on Sunday. By the way, stay tuned. We have a special live episode coming up on Sunday afternoon for our championship preview. But before we go, I just want to dive in a little bit to this Bills-Chiefs game. And I want you to put your coaching hat on for me, Jonathan, because we're going through the week. It's Thursday. Buffalo's getting set to travel to Kansas City. And I have said all year long, I'm not going to spoil my pick. I've said all year long that Buffalo's got that one hurdle, and to me, it's not a physical or a talent blockade. It's a mental blockade. What exactly does Sean McDermott have to do this week to get over the Kansas City playoff hump up here? Because it just seems like every single time that this game happens in the postseason, it's a different Bills team that we see. They play a lot differently. What has to go into this week, preparation-wise, for the Bills as they get ready to go to Kansas City?
For me, you have to do what you did last week, and that's take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. As crazy as it sounds, their game plan last week was to make the game really simple for Josh Allen. He didn't have to do a lot. If you looked at the box score, he threw for 127 yards. Like he didn't have a ridiculous game by the numbers, but he played a clean football game. He didn't turn the football over, and that's because the way they schemed the game up and the way that they game planned, they didn't have him in positions to make risky throws. They didn't put him in positions to do too much with the football. Obviously, it's going to be played up. It's going to be Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen has had trouble beating Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. It's going to be a lot of pressure. You're going into that Kansas City stadium where the crowd is going to be rocking. It's going to be freezing cold. Everything is against you, but what you have to do is take the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Make the game simple. Make the game easy. Lean on your running game. Get the ball out of his hands quick. If you need him to extend a play, but don't rely on him. Don't become reliant on him being Superman, because that's when you get yourself into trouble if you're the Bills. I feel like if they're able to do that and play a clean football game, you have a decent chance of seeing a different result than you've seen in years past. The Chiefs thrive off of you making a mistake. They haven't played exceptionally well this season. They haven't been blowing teams out this season, but they thrive off of playing clean football and other teams not being able to match that. If you play a clean football game and you're in it at the end, you have a really good shot. You just kind of got to take it off of Josh Allen's shoulders a little bit and just let him see simple. Let him see simple game plan, simple route concepts, simple route combinations. Get the ball out of his hand quick. A lot of quick game, a lot of runs, QB designed runs. Just don't make him have to do too much freelancing.
If I were Sean McDermott, this maybe can be a topic that we discuss more on Sunday, but I think it's important to bring it up now. If I were Sean McDermott, I'm looking at the film of the Texans game from last week, and I see that Houston outgains Kansas City by over 100 yards. Chiefs didn't force a turnover. They did have a few sacks. But even so, you look at the box score and really you look at the game. And I'm thinking to myself, I've got a better roster than Houston. I've got a much better quarterback. I've got a significantly better offensive line. My running back tandem is better than what Joe Mixon can provide. And even with Nico Collins in the mix, my wide receiver room, the current room that's healthy, can outplay Houston receivers. And I wonder how much Sean McDermott thinks to himself, you know what? I'm a normally conservative coach. I don't like to attack and rush the passer all the time. I'm not somebody that if I were an offensive coordinator would like to chuck the ball down the field. He's talked so much about it. Josh has to slide. Josh has to take what he can. But I don't know if I'd be Sean McDermott and think to myself, you know what, if Houston can do that to Kansas City, why not take the reins off? And I understand what you're saying about playing contained and wanting to make sure that Josh Allen doesn't make any mistakes. But I'm looking at Kansas City and the way they performed last week, and I'm thinking to myself, why can't we just take the lid off this? Why can't we just go out there, go essentially as aggressive as we can on offense, attack Mahomes with rushing the passer with 5 or 6. I just feel like based on what we've seen recently from Kansas City, and maybe they fall into this trap because we've seen it from year after year that the Chiefs think, you think they're going to have a down few weeks and all of a sudden they come back and they play their best game. But really, if I'm the Bills, if you can cover Travis Kelce, everything else, I would just be as aggressive as you possibly can. That's my counterpoint because I just feel like Buffalo has to know they've got a better roster than Houston, and you just saw what Houston did to Kansas City 6 days ago.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with being defensively aggressive. I agree with putting bodies in the box. I agree with bringing out some exotic blitz packages and just giving Pat Mahomes different looks and not letting him be comfortable standing in the pocket and throwing the football. I agree with that. I would be very weary of falling into traps that you've fallen into in years past where it's Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes going blow for blow, because we've seen that play out a couple of times and it usually doesn't end well for Buffalo. And while you say, yeah, we have a way better roster construction than Houston does, Houston outgained them, outplayed them, did everything else, and still lost by 9 points. You can outgain and outplay this Chiefs team offensively and still lose the game.
But you don't think same parameters, same thing happens stat-wise, yardage-wise, lack of turnovers for Buffalo on Sunday. They're not losing that game. You don't actually think with those same parameters Buffalo's losing that football game?
If you don't finish drives.
Well, sure, but I mean, I would like to think that Allen could get into the end zone at least once or twice.
Very true. But at the same time, I don't know. It kind of goes back to what you started the segment with, is the whole mental block and the whole mental aspect of you haven't been able to do it yet. You haven't been able to get over that hump yet. You've scored a lot of points on them, yes. You've had big games against them, yes. You have lit up the stat sheet and the box score against the Chiefs in the past, yes. But has that translated to wins? No, not in the biggest games where you need them, not in the playoffs when you actually need those wins. I don't think you focus on chasing anything else other than playing the cleanest football game that you can possibly play, taking advantage of all opportunities that you have, especially when you get inside the red zone or when you get in the plus 50, you have to come away with touchdowns.
Yeah, 100%.
When you get on the plus side of the field, you cannot settle for field goals against this team. You have to find a way to get into the end zone. And if you're able to do those things, then yeah, you can have a different outcome than you've had in the past. But I'm not looking big into statistics when it comes to the Chiefs, because the Chiefs haven't statistically been great all year. But guess what? They find ways to win football games. So you can outplay them, you can outgain them, you can out everything them and still lose. This is not something that I'm very, very much worried about as far as stats. You just have to take advantage of opportunities to score.
Yeah, I agree. I find it hard to believe that if the same story rings true on Sunday, Buffalo's going to outgain KC by 100 and some yards and change, not commit a turnover. I think you'd take that if you put it this way. If that stat line occurs and Buffalo loses the football game, Sean McDermott should lose his job. There's no reason on planet Earth that you play that clean of a football game and lose to Kansas City. That, to me, would be worse than 13 seconds. And I don't think there's much worse that you can have than 13 seconds.
Yeah, unless the refs have something to do with it, which is always another thing. When
I want to save that for Wayne, because I would love to hear Wayne Bradford's topic and his thoughts on that predicament. It's also very funny too, going on Facebook Reels and TikTok and listening to all the parodies of the officials. Whether you believe in that sort of thing or not, I don't know. Again, I'm not a Bills fan. I don't particularly care, but I think it's going to be really interesting because at some point Mahomes is going to get a personal foul call in this game.
Yes.
And the only question is going to be is, okay, how does Buffalo respond? And is it a realistic call or is it not a realistic call? That's the big question that I am asking. And I think a lot of people in America is too. Hey, by the way, speaking of Championship Sunday, I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. Normally, we would have an episode every Friday night at 7 o'clock. Well, Friday night episode is being moved because coming up Sunday, we have a special episode live at 2 p.m. here on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Wayne Bradford, Jonathan Williams, and myself going to be joining you for an in-depth look at Bills and Chiefs. What Buffalo has to do to win. Does the history of these two teams in the playoffs play a part? And is this the last chance, real chance, that the Bills have to beat KC before their Super Bowl window theoretically closes? Preview of the game. We're going to pick the game. We'll hear from Nick Artman and his picks as well. His picks have already been submitted, though he won't be on the show on Sunday. And we'll also pick the NFC Championship game between the Commanders and the Eagles. We all know who we want in the Super Bowl, at least in this area, and I think all of America too, besides the Midwest and the D.C. area, but we'll see. Jonathan, I got a feeling these picks on Sunday are going to be really interesting, and I don't think we're all picking the same team. I'm just going to put it out there now.
Yeah, I got a feeling we're going to go a couple of different directions in this one. We've been right about some things, we've been wrong about some things, but it's a new week. So I feel like you're going to get a couple bold predictions.
Well, for our sake, hopefully at least we can get one of our local teams into the Super Bowl. It gives us something to talk about NFL-wise. Regardless, though, make sure to join us Sunday, 2 o'clock. We're back live on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, all your championship preview right up until the NFC Championship game begins. Great stuff from Tom Koval and Jonathan Williams as always. And again, to all of you, thank you for being a part of our network and for joining our show tonight. We'll see you all Sunday. Get some rest. Enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend of football, basketball.